Once upon a time, a trip up these steps meant one thing. You were on your way to Arco Arena to see the Sacramento Kings play, but what if there was a scenario in which you weren't seeing the Sacramento Kings play at Arco, but you were actually seeing the Sacramento Pacers? It's a story, another chapter of Sacramento's long forgotten sporting history, but an interesting one nonetheless. And to better understand this potential alternate timeline for Sacramento sports, well, we need to go back to 1983.
Roughly a week after a kerfuffle at the White House in which Interior Secretary James G. Watt deemed the Beach Boys to be too rock and roll for 4th of July celebrations at the White House, only to learn his direct report, President Ronald Reagan, was both a huge fan and personal friend of said Beach Boys, a group in Sacramento was thinking, wouldn't it be nice if the town had an NBA team?
Well, not exactly. Greg, Luke, and Bill in the Sacramento Sports Association has spent the better part of 7 years trying to land either a Major League Baseball franchise or an NFL team. Their hope was to have that side play in a big old stadium, while their first plan was at Bradshaw Road, and then later they turned their attention here to Natomas, the site that would eventually become Arco Arena. However, neither league had much faith in a group that didn't have a whole lot of money or any experience in building such a large project. And as I said, they spent 7 years sort of bopping around Sacramento trying to get something built to no avail. The National Basketball Association, well, they had no such qualms working with a, shall we say, dubious ownership group. I mean, let's be honest. The National Basketball Association is only a few years removed from having regular season games being played in high school gymnasiums. The league was also more open to smaller markets, even if Sacramento really isn't that much of a small market. Even back in the late 70s and early 80s, this was the largest city in America without a professional sports team. Make no mistake though, NBA playing here was Plan C for the group, and I guess that makes the Kings Plan B of Plan C. So what was Plan A of Plan C? Well, that would have been the Indiana Pacers.
The Midwest basketball team had a fairly nice place to play in Market Square Arena, but had found the transition from ABA to NBA very unkind. The franchise never missed the ABA playoffs and won 3 championships to boot, but would only qualify for the postseason once in its first 10 NBA seasons. By 1983, a lack of investment by ownership had seen the Pacers fall into the doldrums, and the team was viewed as ripe for relocation.
The season ticket numbers plummeted to less than 1,500 after a fire sale by the team, and that 1982-83 season was an unmitigated disaster for the Pacers. Per game attendance numbers were sub 5,000. The team was losing more than $1 million annually. And honestly, ownership had spent a great deal of time just disenfranchising the entire fan base. It's not that Indiana didn't want to support the Pacers, they just did not want to support what was going on right then and right there. Not only was the ownership of the Indiana Pacers bad, there was a weird wrinkle in it as well. The majority owner was Sam Nassi, while minority owner Frank Mariani was the team's governor. Yet those two, alongside Los Angeles Lakers owner Jerry Buss, also owned the team's lease to play at Market Square Arena. This meant a new ownership group could come in, buy the team, buy the lease from them, have them cancel the lease, and then move the Pacers to some other market in America. When news of a potential Indiana Pacers sale first broke, Sacramento was by far and away in the pole position here. They had a $1.5 million deposit ready to go, could meet the $10.5 million asking price. The SSA had even concocted a plan on just where the newfangled Sacramento Pacers would play for that 1983-84 season, and oh man, we gotta go somewhere. They were going to have this new NBA team play right here. The wonderful, the venerable, the amazing Sacramento Memorial Auditorium, one of my favorite buildings in this entire city. Sacramento Memorial Auditorium, though, was part one of a 3-part approach to hosting the NBA during that 83-84 season. The team would also play some games in UC Davis's Rec Hall and the University of Pacific Spano Center down in Stockton, while the new arena back in the Thomas was being built. Through the lens of modernity, that is one of the most ridiculous proposals, ideas I have ever heard when it comes to sports in Sacramento, and there have been some ridiculous things over the years. It's absolutely ludicrous that they would play in those three buildings. And just for reference, when the Golden State or then San Francisco Warriors were touring California and made a few stops here in Sacramento, they didn't play at Memorial Auditorium. They played at Sac High School. So this idea floated by the Sacramento Sports Association, absolutely preposterous. Even if it wasn't feasible, I still love it. The thing is, it may not have even been real. While Luke and Bill and the SSA was pitching that to local media in Sacramento, they had a different message for those back in Indiana. 2 days later, Luke and Bill was in Indy going on about how the Pacers would stay put in Indianapolis in Market Square Arena for a few seasons. Honestly, they did have the options because they were buying the lease from Nassi and Mariani, and I guess Jerry Buss as well. As the short-term future of the Pacers was being resolved, should they be purchased by the Sacramento Sports Association, other groups had decided to enter the bidding for this NBA team. There were two different bidders from Anaheim, including a group backed by Reggie Jackson. There was also rumblings that Indianapolis was trying to do something to keep the team in town, although those plans were very loose, very informal, and no singular bidder had stepped up. Back in Sacramento, the SSA's bid was facilitated by a business led by Louis Scheifel, who approached Luke and Bill earlier in 1983 and said, "I'll help you find an NBA team that's for sale and facilitate a transaction if you give me a finder's fee." And boy, this becomes an entire ordeal. Anyway, as for Scheifel, he's a very interesting character in NBA circles.
The attorney had previously served as general manager of the New Orleans Jazz, where his claim to fame was being called a lying, backstabbing son of a bitch by Pete Maravich.
Scheifel later goes on to become a minority owner in the Miami Heat and serves as that team's general manager for its first 7 seasons of existence. I'm not even quite sure how Scheifel is qualified to be an NBA general manager, but people kept hiring him, and that's really all you needed in the NBA during the 60s, 70s, and 80s. And really, that just highlights who Louis Scheifel was. He was a hanger-on, someone who managed to worm his way into NBA circles and got stuck there. Now, in his defense, he does help Luke and Bill in the SSA locate an NBA franchise for sale in the Indiana Pacers, and he does instigate talks between the two sides. This is basically Sacramento's team to lose by default at this point. So the Sacramento Sports Association submits its bid to purchase the Pacers in March 1983. The two sides continue to have talks. Then in April, there is a meeting between the two sides right here in the capital city. Luke and Bill and Pacers ownership are basically finalizing the details at this point. It's essentially in the bag. Luke and Bill would later go on to say he was 90% confident of the deal for Sacramento to purchase the Indiana Pacers to get done. Then, shortly after that meeting right here, something changes dramatically. The change did not come from the other relocation bids. In particular, the Anaheim bid, which was seen as Sacramento's biggest competitor, was very unlikely to gain any traction. The National Basketball Association's continued struggles with Donald Sterling over his repeated attempts to move the San Diego Clippers to Los Angeles really meant there was no appetite to have another team relocate to another part of Southern California. An Orange County franchise only deepens issues in league offices with Sterling, leading to more lawsuits. It just seemed like a very far-fetched scenario. It turns out there was actually a dark horse in the bid for the Pacers, and that dark horse
came from the city of Indianapolis, who had not given up hope just yet. Then Mayor William Hudnut and several local leaders sounded out anyone and everyone in the state that would have had enough money to buy the Pacers and keep them around.
Eventually, it is Melvin and Herb Simon who step forward, pledging to save Indiana's NBA franchise. Their bid is so last minute, however, they have to fax it to Pacers ownership. It's believed Nassi and Mariani are pretty much ready to sign off on transferring their franchise to the Sacramento Sports Association, who would then break the lease to Market Square Arena and bring the team California.
From the moment the Simon Brothers bid is received, talks between the Pacers owners and the SSA are classified as hectic. The entire deal unravels in the span of a week when the NBA sort of makes it clear to Nassi and Mariani that it'll only approve the sale of the team to a local group. When the Pacers deal falls through, Lukenbill and the SSA turn their attention to another franchise, the Kansas City Kings.
Royalty. Royalty is an interesting thing in Sacramento in 1983 because earlier that year, the Queen of England herself stopped by the City of Trees. For some reason, the visit included having the Kit Carson mountain men of Amador County hang out in front of Sutter's Fort. Ah, yes, the shared bond of murdering indigenous people, I believe, for Northern California and the British Crown. This was their breakfast at Tiffany's moment.
And I said, well, that's the one thing we got.
One question you may find yourself asking is what happens if Sacramento had bought the Pacers and not the Kings? Does this mean Arco 1 doesn't get built? Arco 2 never gets erected. We never get the greatest show on court and, well, a lot of losing. And it's kind of a difficult question to answer. I don't know if Arco 1's everything. Arco 2 was always the end goal for that Sacramento ownership group, the SSA. So there's no doubt they would have had the Pacers playing here. Similarly, I don't think much changes if Sacramento had acquired the Pacers and not the Kings. The Sacramento Sports Association never did much in the way of long-term planning. In fact, when they did buy the Kings, they don't change anything. They don't change the name. They don't really change the logo or the branding. They were just flying by the seat of their pants. It is highly doubtful that they would have come up with a new team name or a new logo. That wasn't on the agenda. Their agenda was getting an arena built. There are a couple of changes that happened. Firstly, Lukenbill always blamed Scheifele for not landing the Pacers, and they end up embroiled in a long-term lawsuit that does take up quite a bit of Lukenbill's time. I mean, this starts in '84 and goes all the way into the early '90s. The other difference, a little known Division II basketball coach by the name of Jerry Reynolds likely never joins the Sacramento basketball franchise's staff and becomes a staple here in the city. Reynolds was coaching in Kansas at the time and had a connection to then KC Kings coach Phil Johnson. Then Reynolds arrives and gloms on and stays here forever despite having no real, I know people love Jerry Reynolds, but come on, look at the track record. Anyway, you get the idea. The names and the faces would have changed when it came to the Sacramento Pacers versus the Sacramento Kings, but the foundations, the essence of that franchise would not have been all of that different. Those running the Pacers at this time were better than Kings GM Joe Axelson, who again somehow stayed on for years after the team relocated from Kansas City to Sacramento, but not by a hell of a lot. The fate of this franchise, whether they were known as the Sacramento Pacers or the Sacramento Kings, is likely going to be the same. First and foremost, Greg Lukenbill did not know basketball. The rest of the SSA, meanwhile, was only interested in developing that Natomas farmland. The group would have still ran into money problems regardless of the sellout streak at Arco 1 and Arco 2. And that sellout streak, by the way, probably happens whether it's the Pacers or the Kings. Back in the Midwest, the Indiana Pacers' fortunes were revived when the Simon brothers elevated Donnie Walsh from assistant coach to general manager. It's a shrewd move that transforms that franchise. He goes on to draft Reggie Miller. He hires Larry Brown. They become one of the NBA's most consistent winners in the 1990s. A story in Sacramento, it's not quite the same. To that end, the first incarnation of Sacramento Kings ownership was way too focused on building not just an arena for the Kings to play, but also the much larger stadium that never happens. They're so distracted by all of that, operations of the team usually just devolves into picking a name out of the hat. Maybe removing Axelson, who came with the Kings as general manager from Kansas City to Sacramento, changes some of that. It certainly couldn't have hurt because he was the absolute pits, but I'm just not sure if it dramatically affects the trajectory of the local NBA franchise here in Sacramento. Pacers, Kings, it's probably going to be one and the same. It's really just hard to envision that scenario where we here in Sacramento, when it comes to the NBA team, aren't exactly where we are now. A little over 40 years after Sacramento did try to steal the Pacers, Indiana just may have had the last laugh. The trade for Therese Halliburton and their run to the NBA Finals last season with the former Kings draft pick may have been some form of karmic justice if you're inclined to believe in such things. In conclusion, the Sacramento Pacers almost happened. The Queen visiting Sacramento definitely did happen. And finally, don't stand between President Ronald Reagan and his Beach Boys unless you want to eliminate those good vibrations. Thank you for watching this video. If you would like to know more about how the Sacramento Kings best team, the greatest show on court, was really assembled by nothing more than a fluke, well, check out the video in the upper left-hand corner of your screen over there, maybe a little close to the Tower Bridge. And for more Sacramento sporting content playlist, lower left-hand corner of your screen. That does it for me. That sound behind you is Interstate 5. And until next time, hashtag take it out the 25.